So what is this mythical process or solution that we're offering that adds so much value? So we call it the candidate process, and effectively all it is a process and a digital solution that delivers the technical clarity at the beginning of your project. So how does it actually work? So the way that we ask a company is we say to a company, right, can you identify a simple business process? And inside that process, what we want them to do is basically have maybe the interaction between 2 or 3 different systems. And maybe it has to be, let's say if it was the RFI and the RFP process, obviously we would want to involve the system that they're just about to purchase. Then all we do then is we embark on a requirements gathering stage. We gather up the requirements, we get acceptance criteria from that company to say what they would deem as a success. And then the step then is, what we do is we come in and we land a lot of our tech. We come in with all these foundational pillars that we think then the business doesn't really have to consider that. We've hopefully built out all the error handling, all the different ways that they would actually do the visualization of the process. And then we just concentrate on the requirements of that specific candidate process. And now the duration of that, believe it or not, is not, usually it's a high performing team that we get in to do that. That high performing team understand all the things that they need to do in terms of a digital transformation solution. So basically that team will really go at it with the requirements that they've got, and they will basically do the interactions. And we think that that is achievable, and we've proved it in a number of cases where it's maybe 4 to 6 weeks or 2 to 3 sprints within, if you're within an agile world. Now, what you've really done there is that when you basically start integrating with these applications or solutions, one of the key things is, like, when we go to the software provider and say, can you give us a development environment? You wouldn't believe how many times that becomes a problem. And the fact that they can't really readily spin up a development environment for you or a test environment, that is pretty critical to your project. If you've got a digital transformation project and that software provider seems to find it hard to be able to put together a dev system or a test system, or it's going to be quite costly to do that, or we don't have the data, you're starting to uncover information within that 4 to 6 week period that you don't really want to find out 12 months into a project when you're maybe starting to interact with them. So things like that. And even if you say, for instance, they had an API layer, and let's say you're saying, right, that process might be, say, a client onboarding process, and we're getting information out of their solution, and we're creating something within the back end product system. If that's happening over a period of time which isn't very performant, or even if the data that they say is available, you can't get access to that via the APIs, then you kind of understand then that, well, actually, how mature is this API layer? Are we buying something that is maybe where there's going to be a lot more development involved? Because I would say that in a high percentage of the projects that we get involved in, the actual organization, unwittingly to them, they have to go and spend a significant amount of money filling all these gaps and holes. So all of this that process, starts to kind of then just really start to kind of put the lens on a number of things to do with that project. So as I say, the outcomes are much greater understanding of the software provider, the capabilities, the maturity of them. The other thing that we think this gives us to the actual stakeholders is it gives confidence, because what I said at the beginning there is that if you've got a maturity assessment of your organization, if you're able to demonstrate an automated business process that interacts with 4 or 5 systems, or whatever the process is, and you're able to demonstrate that very early on in the project, that promotes significant confidence within your stakeholders. And you will definitely need that when you start spending the millions of pounds that these projects actually spend, because that's what people want to know, is that this is going to be a success. And if you can prove that early on, then you're a much better things. I think the other side of it is that timescales and costs are much more understood, because if you have a good candidate process or you have a bad candidate process, really you're just repeating a candidate process over and over again. And if you're starting to realize that that first initial easy candidate process ended up, the timescales were much longer than what you expected, or the costs started to spiral out of control, then it's pretty obvious that once you get to the more complex processes, you're going to end up with, with much greater costs. The other thing that we think this process gives you is a complete documented set of artifacts, and all the lessons learned, the understanding of the risks, the dependencies, and all of that stuff. That is usually the stuff that the company gets out of that, along with all the information that it gains within that very short period of time, which we believe is quite a small investment considering they're spending millions of pounds. And in terms of ongoing benefits, what sometimes happens is, even if a company or a software provider does fall short within the candidate process, the company might not have much option to go with somebody else. So what we find is that having that process at the beginning, because they haven't signed the contract at that stage, it gives them much better leverage when they're doing the contract negotiation. So if they're saying, well, we're going to have to spend money filling this gap because we thought you did it and you said you did it, then the contract negotiations go down a completely different route. And then, as I've said maybe a few times already, is that if this process goes well, it really does give you the technical blueprint for the transformation project going forward. And it allows then, everybody then is getting, they get a well-defined and well-oiled machine going because they've actually made this a success. And again, because of maybe what we do and what we bring to the table in terms of all the foundational blocks in the cloud, maybe at real time, we're probably taking a number of things to the company and saying, you don't have to go and build this from scratch. So we think that we can accelerate that digital journey for these clients. So that very small process, in our opinion, and we've seen it work very well, and for a number of businesses, and we think it saves a significant amount of money.